Happy Father's Day.
Happy Father's Day to you too.
Thank you very much. All of you remember the joke about being on a fully automated, robotic-driven airplane, in which the speaker said, "Nothing on this airplane can go wrong. Can go wrong. Can go wrong." I was delayed getting in here because we have those automatic faucets in the bathroom, and it wouldn't go off. And I finally did it with my book. It still didn't go off. So what do? Call Sam Adams? I didn't do that. I'm going to be excited to see whether it finished when I finish here. I'm going to run back and see if it's still running. But, you know, we get automated in our lives, and sometimes in getting automated, we forget the essentials. That most important part, like I just forgot my clicker. Thank you very much. My son had his CAT scan and a visit with a neurologist Thursday, who said, "You've had a major concussion." Well, you would have thought that it told him that earlier, like when you go home, don't go to sleep because you had a concussion, but they didn't. So he said, "Well, can I drive?" And the guy said, "Yeah, a mile or two, but it'll be 6 to 12 weeks before you return to normal." That's a long time. But anyway, I'm going to write the Houston Chronicle a letter about Memorial Herman's #1 trauma center and see what happens. Okay, prayer. The story that I'm going to use for today's lecture is, this is an original lecture. Now, I've been doing things for 40 or 50 years and never done anything original. So having said this is original, be kind after it's over, or I may never do another original one. Out of 2 Kings chapter 4, we find a day Elisha was passing through Shunem, where a wealthy woman lived who urged him to have a meal. So whenever he passed that way, he would stop there for a meal. She said to her husband, "Look, I am sure that this man who regularly passes our way is a holy man of God. Let us make a small roof chamber with walls and put there for him a bed, a table, a chair, and a lamp, so that he may stay there whenever he comes to us." Well, we skip a few verses, and he has visited the house, and he greatly appreciates what the folks have done for him. And so he asked, "What can I do for you?" And his servant answered, "Well, she has no son." So we pick up the story here. He said, "At this season, in due time, you shall embrace a son." She replied, "No, my lord, O man of God, do not deceive your servant." The woman conceived and bore a son at that season, in the due time, as Elisha had declared to her. When the child was older, he went out one day to his father among the reapers. He complained to his father, "Oh, my head, my head." The father said to his servant, "Carry him to his mother." He carried him and brought him to his mother. The child sat on her lap until noon, and then he died. She went up and laid him on the bed of the man of God. Now, let me remind you, they had built a room in which Elijah could visit. Included a bed and a desk and a table and a lamp. She went up and laid him on the bed of the man of God, closed the door on him, and left. Then she called to her husband and said, "Send me one of the servants and one of the donkeys, so that I may quickly go to the man of God and come back again." He said, "Why go to him today? It is neither new moon nor Sabbath." The reference to new moon tells us that these people had a system of pagan worship as well as religious worship. They were doing things when there was a new moon. She said, "It will be all right." Then she saddled the donkey and said to her servant, "Urge the animal on. Do not hold back for me unless I tell you. Why go to him today? It is neither the new moon nor the Sabbath. Come back to unless I tell you." So she set out and came to the man of God at Mount Carmel. Now, we don't know how far Mount Carmel was from the town in which she lived, but we may assume it was a good distance. We don't know how long the boy will be dead either. But when the man of God saw her coming, he said to Gehazi, that was his servant, "Look, there is the Shunammite woman. Run at once to meet her and say to her, 'Are you all right? Is your husband all right? Is the children all right?' She answered, 'It is all right.' When she came to the man of God at the mountain, she caught hold of his feet. Gehazi approached to push her away, but the man of God said, 'Let her alone, for she is in bitter distress. The Lord has hidden it from me and has not told me.' Then she said, 'Did I ask my Lord for a son? Did I not say, do not mislead me?' He said to Gehazi, 'Gird up your loins and take my staff in your hand and go. If you meet anyone, give no greeting. If anyone greets you, do not give an answer.' In other words, don't stop to talk. 'And lay my staff on the face of the child.' Then the mother of the child said, 'As the Lord lives, and as you yourself live, I will not leave without you.' In other words, she isn't going to leave Elisha and follow Gehazi. So he rose up and followed her, Elisha did. Gehazi went on ahead and laid the staff on the face of the child, but there was no sound or sign of life. He came back to meet him and told him, 'The child has not awakened.' When Elisha came into the house, he saw the child lying on his bed, Elijah's bed, not the child's bed. So he went in and closed the door on the two of them and prayed to the Lord. Then he got up on the bed and lay upon the child, putting his mouth upon his mouth, his eyes upon his eyes, and his hands upon his hands. And while he lay bent over him, the flesh of the child became warm. He got down, walked once to and fro in the room, then got up again and bent over him. The child sneezed 7 times, and the child opened his eyes. Elisha summoned Gehazi and said, 'Call the Shunammite woman.' So he called her. When she came in, he said, 'Take your son.' She came and fell down at his feet, bowing to the ground. Then she took her son and left." What do we make of this story? Well, first of all, there's a lot of detail here. Exactly how the resuscitation of the child occurred. He was the first, I think, to give mouth to mouth. And that's about as clear as the Bible can be. And they have spent a lot of time in filling in a lot of the detail of the event. However, we still have the opportunity to speculate on the things that aren't said here, that are critical to our understanding of prayer. Consider the emotions associated with this story. At this season, in due time, you shall embrace a son. That would be joyous disbelief on her part. "No, my Lord, O man of God, don't deceive your servant." Her words to him. The woman conceived and bore a son at that season in due time, as Elisha had declared to her. She felt, I'm sure, great joy. The text had told us in the part that I did not read to you that her husband was old, and therefore the implication is they couldn't have children, yet she did. And so, joy, joy, joy. Yes. The boy dies. She experiences grief. And anger. One of her reactions to all of this event is what? I told you not to deceive me. That's the overriding consideration when all of this occurs and the boy is dead. The mother says, I told you not to deceive me. Did I ask you to give me a son? Oh, my goodness. My goodness. I have people yell at me, but never like that. That's awful. And so she has a problem. And one of the problems is anger. How does she get rid of anger? How does anybody get rid of anger? But the man, let's consider this, but the man of God said, let her alone, this is when they're about to meet her, for she is in bitter distress. The Lord has hidden it from me and has not told me. What is he experiencing? This is a prophet, which is called the prophet of Israel. This is a prophet in the 800s that was for 6 decades, the primary voice of God in the northern kingdom. And what's he said? I don't know. God didn't tell me what had happened. Well, let's go on. Then she said, did I ask my Lord for a son? Did I not say, do not mislead me? What? It's anger. We've said that. It's disappointment. It's grief overriding her joy. It's the recognition that there will be no more children. Her husband is too old. There's great despair here. And throughout this story, as it reads in the Old Testament, it fills in a lot of the blanks, but not all of the blanks. We have to make some assumptions about how she feels. We have to make some assumptions about how the prophet feels. He says, God didn't tell me that this had happened. So, the servant, following Elisha's instructions, cannot revive the boy. The woman is not in the room when the boy returns to life through the work of Elisha, which involved prayer. The story ends with the woman, after bowing to Elisha, taking her child and leaving. Sort of an abrupt ending to an event of great magnitude. Great magnitude. Her emotions are run the gamut. Joy upon the boy's birth, grief as he dies in her arms, faith that Elijah can save the boy, journeys to find him, believes that only Elijah can perform the miracle, joy again. We can assume the story brings into focus several types of prayer. One of those is the prayer of thanksgiving at the boy's birth and at his rebirth. Thanksgiving. Carol asked about why Jesus in the Lord's Prayer doesn't begin with thanksgiving. And there isn't an answer to that in the Scripture. And Claude said last week to me after the lesson that we ought to be talking about Thanksgiving because that should be our main focus. And that's true too. So we have here a woman who is thankful that she has a son. She's thankful that he's brought back to life. But between then and then, she goes through, I think, although the text doesn't tell us, she goes through an enormous problem with grief and anger. And at whom is she angry? The man of God, Elijah. Did I ask you for a son? No. No. But let's remember now, they did this great thing to build him a room in which to live, and he says to his servant, what can I do for them? The servant says, she has no son, so a son is brought into the story. And her reaction is very human, is it not? I think probably you have at some point in your life been terribly disappointed with the way things worked out. I don't see any great recognition on your face, so I assume I'm wrong, but I'm not going to make that assumption. We all experience disappointment, do we not? Do we learn in the process of disappointment the prayer of relinquishment, where we let go of that which has obsessed us? One of the things here, interestingly enough, the obsession is with Elijah, who wants to do something good for the woman. It doesn't turn out well for a while. It doesn't turn out well. We don't know for how long. We don't know how long the child lived before he died, except he was capable of going into the field to be with his father. Interestingly enough, the father isn't in the picture. The father says to the servant, take the boy to his mother. At least the text doesn't tell us the father is in the picture. The woman, however, takes charge. What are we to make of that? Well, his father was old, but maybe she was too. Maybe she was domineering. That happens in marriages, doesn't it?
Well, he was out
He was out in his field with the reapers, what?
and so maybe he was working hard and knew Mom would have more time.
Well, I can remember, we had 3 boys. I can remember passing them off. In fact, Gail went shopping when our oldest son was still in diapers, and he had one of those unexpected, or maybe it was expected, deposits in his diapers. And I just left him sitting on the bed until his mother came home. I mean, after all, isn't that the job of the mother? She did make some, married? Yeah, we're still married. She did make some comments about that, and I told her she needed to read the small print in the marriage license. She said, where is it? As if she was going to go read it. I told her it was in the safety deposit box, and I'd lost the key. And anyway, part of that's not true, but leaving him sitting on the bed is true. And he grew up fine. He's our oldest son, and he's in Belize right now, digging in the Mayan ruins. Well, let's look at what happens in this Old Testament story about the application of prayer. We have Thanksgiving, the prayer of Thanksgiving, and the prayer of Thanksgiving in his birth and rebirth. And we have the prayer of the forsaken. Elijah expresses the fact, God didn't tell me, he didn't talk to me, I've been his servant all these years, and he didn't talk to me. And so he feels disappointed in the God that he served. Have you ever been disappointed in God? I mean, be honest.
Yeah.
Sure. The prayer of relinquishment. What would the woman have done had the boy remained dead? She would have had an enormous problem with her anger. she would have had a thing which would have eaten away at her life. Anger. Anger. Every time we read about things that happen violently in our country, we learn that there are warning signs that we should have been cognizant of. The young man who killed the people in Charleston, South Carolina, plenty of warning signs. The problem is, had you listened in to hear those warning signs, there would have been a segment of society that says, you're invading his privacy. You can't do that. The consequence is, no one listened to the warning signs. But they occur in society over and over and over again. Who is supposed to be sensitive to the people out there? The Christians of this community are supposed to be sensitive to the people they meet. Am I wrong? Aren't we supposed to be compassionate and caring in such a way that we can identify those in need? And what do they need? They need the Word of God and the gospel. Is that what we give them? Not very effectively. And so we can, yes?
I don't think there was ever a more beautiful sermon than what the family member said about forgiveness for that young man. That was a sermon that ought to be preached every day.
Every day. She's saying that the sermon, what the family said when they brought him into court, should be something we would hear over and over again. And there's truth to that. But when should that have been preached?
Beforehand.
Before. I'll get into a depression. I don't want to go there. Prayer of adoration. In the course of this process, the woman would have experienced not only thanksgiving, but the love of God, particularly when the boy is brought back. And the prayer of adoration, one of the things we'll learn in the next few weeks, includes thanksgiving and praise. A lot of prayer is built upon the concept of thanksgiving and praise of God. That's probably the way we should begin every prayer before we get into our desires. But these people didn't have what we have. This is 892 to 832 BC. They had some of the Psalms of David, but they didn't have the teachings of Paul. They didn't have a methodology where Scripture was taught. The temple was where you went to offer sacrifice, not to learn at all. So these folks, in their search through life, don't have what we have. Be anxious for nothing, but in everything by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your request be known to God. Philippians 4:6. Devote yourselves to prayer, keeping alert in it with an attitude of thanksgiving. Colossians 4:2. Rejoice always, pray without ceasing, in everything give thanks, for this is God's will for you in Christ Jesus. How wonderful it would have been if Elijah could have said something to the woman like that. But he couldn't. He didn't know this idea. Through him, then, let us continually offer up a sacrifice of praise to God. That is, the fruit of lips that give thanks to his name. Speaking to one another in psalms and hymns and spiritual songs, singing and making melody with your heart to the Lord. Always giving thanks for all things in the name of our Lord, Jesus Christ, to God, even the Father. Probably the most difficult thing to do is to offer praise and adoration when you've been stomped upon by society or stomped upon in whatever it is you're doing. You have to let go of whatever it was that possessed you in order to move to the next level of adoration and thanksgiving. If we're constantly absorbed with regret and anger and grief, we'll never really realize the potential that God has for us. In fact, we might conclude He doesn't have any plans for us. I will bless the Lord at all times. His praise shall continually be in my mouth. My soul will make its boast in the Lord. The humble will hear it and rejoice. Oh, magnify the Lord with me, and let us exalt his name together. Romans. First, I thank my God through Jesus Christ for you all, because your faith is being proclaimed throughout the whole world. What does this prayer teach us? To pray for others. To pray for the people who are in the struggle with us. May my prayer be counted as incense before you, the lifting up of my hands as the evening offering. The Lord is near to all who call upon him, to all who call upon him in truth. He will fulfill the desire of those who fear him. He will also hear their cry and will save them. I was crying to the Lord with my voice, and he answered me from his holy mountain. The prayers of David in the Psalms are monumental in that they show us what David and how David progressed in prayer. How he progressed. His first prayer was not his last prayer. He learns as he proceeds. Now, what about the one, oh, how majestic is your name? As I look at the heavens and what you have created, what am I? What is man that you're mindful of me? And the Son of Man that you visit us? What is happening to David? What will happen to us as we progress through the steps of prayer? Where we learn to focus not just upon our desires, but our desires for other people. Not just upon what we want, but what they need. The whole emphasis in effective prayer life is focused differently than we've been raised up to do, at least as I was raised up to do. I think back in the Orange Creek Methodist Church that I supplied when I was in college. There was a man named Beckham. Mr. Beckham was the patriarch of this little segment of Florida, which was mostly now pine trees and old houses, except for this little white church that the kind you see by the side of the road. Mr. Beckham was in his 90s. I would call on him to pray. Wherever he was in the sanctuary, he struggled to get to the center aisle and kneel there. He wouldn't pray if he wasn't kneeling. Oh my goodness. I was amazed at him. It was hard for him to walk. But he had the strength to kneel and to get up. And his prayers came from the soul, the heart, not superficial. These were genuine prayers. If he had been there every Sunday, sometimes he was sick, I would have called on him every Sunday, because he prayed from within himself. Well, David learned to do that too. And let's look at one of his prayers. The Divine Shepherd. All of you know this. Sure you do. Do you really? The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. David was a shepherd, as you know. And I've told some of you before that he wrote this psalm differently than we read it. He wrote it as if it was a sheep doing the psalm. Now let's try that for a minute. And for those of you who have heard me on this subject, I apologize, but I have found that over the years you don't remember well. So, I'm being facetious. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. A sheep is not very smart. You've never seen one in a circus. You haven't? They just don't have an intellectual quotient which makes them trainable in that sense. But they are trainable in issues that the shepherd was confronted with. He makes me lie down in green pastures. Why? Well, they need to eat. But more particularly, they need to not follow the path in the field that the wolf has made. The wolf knows they're stupid, and so they walk back and forth, creating a path, and the sheep go down the path, and the wolf gets them. So, he makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. If a sheep stuck its snout in running water, it would drown. Why? Because the water would go up through his wool and make the whole body wet. And if you've ever looked at a sheep, it has very little tiny legs, very small. They fall over and drown. Told you they weren't very bright. But the shepherd learned to go to the stream, and like you do when you're at the ocean and you want to build a sand castle, you dig out an area into which water flows so that you can use the sand and build a castle. The shepherd dug the side of the creek so that he created a place where the water was still and the sheep could go to drink. He restores my soul. Well, that's self-evident. He preserves their life. He leads me in right paths. That goes back to that path that the wolf has created, which is symbolic of the way our society sometimes follows the wrong path. Isn't it our obligation as a church to be teaching the right path and leading people down the right path? For his name's sake, the shepherd did not own the sheep. The sheep were owned by the village. And the shepherd's ability to bring the sheep back to the village determined his reputation. If sheep were lost to bears, wolves, tigers, or lions, he had a bad mark by his name. So his name's sake is the reason that he led the sheep. Even though I walk through the darkest valley, I fear no evil, for you are with me. That's self-evident. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. Well, you've seen the shepherd's crook. That's to pull the sheep back from the brambles or from an animal. But what about the rod? The rod was used to beat the animal to death, but it was also used to teach the sheep a lesson. It was not uncommon for a young sheep to wander off despite what the shepherd wanted. So the shepherd picked the sheep up and broke its leg. And he did so with the rod. Then he bandaged up the leg, and the sheep would walk next to the shepherd until his leg had healed. And then he would walk next to the shepherd for the rest of his life. The rod, which inflicted pain, also preserved his life. Sometimes, if we look at the rods that strike us in life, at the time that we're being hurt, we don't see the end result. We only see it as we live it. So, sometimes the rod is for our benefit. That's what I always told my kids. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil, and my cup overflows. In the area where David would have been a shepherd, in the field, the meadows, there were small holes in the ground. In that hole in the ground lived an adder. The adder would strike the sheep in the nose as it grazed through the pasture, and it would kill the sheep. The shepherds learned that there was an oil that they could put on the sheep's head that would be offensive to the snake. And so they anointed the head with oil, and the sheep could eat in the field safely. My cup overflows. I told you that a sheep can't drink running water. It also won't drink out of a cup if it has to stick its face in it. So the shepherd, in the evening, carried water in a big vase or pitcher on his shoulder and poured the water in cups to the point of overflowing. You've done things like that, not necessarily intentionally, but you've pushed it to the point where it almost overflowed. Then the sheep would drink out of the cup because they were right at the surface and the top. So, goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord my whole life long. This prayer, from the sheep's point of view, assured them of, if they followed the rules, a long and prosperous life. This psalm and all the other psalms that are praise and thanksgiving are there for us to learn, to read, to prayerfully consider, because they promise a joyful and prosperous life in the care of the great shepherd. Ooh, think about that. Think about that. What a marvelous commitment. And I've now reached the point where the psalmist says, shut up. I'll see you next week.